The camera rushes down the jet bridge like a rumor, all breath and bright light, as if the airport itself can't wait for the story to happen. Wheels thump over the metal threshold. A blur of boarding passes. A baby crying in aisle 14. Overhead bins yawning like hungry mouths. We slide into row 6 premium economy, the place where status and compromises shake hands. And there she is, hair tucked behind one ear, phone in a marble pattern case balanced on her palm, a latte foam confidence sitting neatly in her chest. Her name is Claire. The seat number glowing above her duffel reads 6C, or so she believes. An aisle later, a man in a navy travel jacket and scuffed loafers pauses by the same seat. He's composed the way some jazz chords are composed, relaxed, unbothered, invisible until you notice the precision. He checks his boarding pass again, then the seat placard. "Excuse me," he says softly, a warm baritone that doesn't need to announce itself. "I think you're in my seat." Claire doesn't look up at first. The phone is more interesting. A text thread from Ari Recruiter. The latest win slid into the top of the screen like a trophy. She looks up then, eyebrows drawn into a practiced rectangle of disbelief. "This is 6C, she says, pronouncing it like a verdict. "I'm pretty sure I'm in the right place." He nods, a smile that's more polite than cheerful. "I know it's weird, but mine says 6C2. He turns the pass so she can read it. The little logo of Aurelia Air, an amber wing with a subtle crown, sits in the corner. Under the barcode Heart, M, Seat 6C. Zone 2. Early boarding. A flight attendant arrives, brisk and gracious, a little winded from gate drama that shows in her eyes. "Everything okay here?" Claire laughs, the kind of laugh that's actually a no. "It's just a mix-up. I was here first. I've got 6C. She shows her phone, then her paper stub. The attendant scans them both with her eyes, then scans the man's pass. Her name tag says R. Santos. She's already calculating. The overhead bins are full. The back rows are heating up. The captain wants the door closed 5 minutes ago. "I see it," Santos says gently. "We do have 2 6C passes. System glitch. Let me check the manifest." The plane tilts on its own axis. A baby hiccups. A suitcase refuses to settle. The couple in 5 begin a whisper fight about who forgot the neck pillow. Claire crosses her arms, chin high. "Look, I hate to be difficult," she says, which is the sentence people say before they are difficult. "But I booked this seat specifically. I prefer the aisle. I need to get up and stretch. It's important for me." The man, Malik, doesn't bristle. His eyes are kind, steady, the way sunlight is steady even when clouds misbehave. "I prefer the aisle too," he replies. "We'll sort it out." There it is, the moment that will become a story. You can feel it forming like frost on glass. Claire's glance flickers over him, not looking to see but looking to place. And in that tiny flicker live 100 assumptions. About whose time matters, whose booking counts, whose tone gets the benefit of the doubt. She doesn't hear herself say it. She wouldn't like herself if she did. "You probably got upgraded by mistake," she tosses out lightly, a jab wrapped in a joke. "Happens." Santos exhales, professional and tired all at once. "We have a spare aisle in row 9, she offers. "I can move one of you there and add credit to your account." "I'm fine with row 9, Malik says, eyes still friendly. He says it like a gift, like it costs him nothing. But then he glances at Santos, and something in that glance is different. It isn't pleading or pushing. It's the look people give when they have already solved this problem in their head, when they know the system from the inside and are choosing kindness anyway. "Make sure the credit lands," he adds, not as a threat, but as a reminder that details matter. Claire hears none of that. She hears only that she's won. Relief loosens her shoulders. The aisle is hers. "Thank you," she says to Santos, overbright. "I appreciate you." Santos nods, sketches a smile, and moves Malik toward row 9. He lifts his carry-on compact, well-made, the kind of bag that says function over flex, and tucks it precisely into the bin. He doesn't glance back at Claire. He doesn't need to. He slides into 9D, fastens his belt, and opens a slim notebook like a door to a quiet room. The page shows a grid of boxes. The top line says OPS Audit, FLT 417. He checks a tiny box labeled Boarding Efficiency. Up in row 6, Claire texts Ari, recruiter a tiny victory. Made my flight. Got the aisle I needed. Next stop, new beginning. Her heart clicks into the rhythm of a person who believes things bend when she leans. She doesn't see Santos glancing down the aisle, recounting seats, tapping a code into the galley phone. The way small acts of de-escalation add up to survival on days like this. We push back. We trundle. We lift. The city slides away like a plan you thought you wanted. Seat belt signs glow. The air turns to velvet at 10,000 feet. Claire tilts her head, closes her eyes, and makes a list in her mind. Presentations to sharpen, jokes to polish, obstacles to overcome. She will tell this story later, except she will write the first part in bold and skip the parts that make people wince. There was this guy in my seat and he got moved. Period. End of sentence. But sentences don't end where we think they do. Down in row 9, Malik draws a small star next to another box. Crew tone under pressure. He's not angry. He's not even disappointed. He has seen worse and better and everything in between. He is traveling incognito for reasons that will be obvious later. For now, he is simply a man in 9D, reading, noting, breathing, choosing his moment. He closes the notebook, his index finger marking a page like a bookmark and a boundary. The story, if it wants to be honest, is just beginning. And here's the hook that pulls us forward. When they land, the door will open to camera flashes and startled whispers, to a small crowd of airport staff waiting at the jet bridge with the precise, nervous energy people have when the boss walks in. And Claire will stand up, smooth her blouse, and watch as the man she asked to move, the man she assumed was upgraded by accident, is greeted with a quiet, unmistakable authority. People will call him Mr. Hart. The captain will shake his hand. Someone will say, "Welcome back, sir." And the rumor that raced down the jet bridge at the beginning will finally catch up to the truth. But we're not there yet. We're still 31,000 feet over a country that loves its stories neat. This one refuses to be neat. Cruising altitude reshapes everyone. The bravado of boarding gives way to the rituals of flight. Headphones on, laptops open, elbows carefully negotiated across the invisible border of armrests. Claire orders sparkling water with lemon, because that's the kind of detail she thinks future herself will appreciate. She watches a row of thumbnails on her screen, productivity videos, a TED Talk about empathy she saved but never finished, an airline safety video she always skips. The cabin hums the color of anonymity. Halfway down the aisle, Malik presses the call button and then changes his mind, lowering his hand. The attendant is already moving. Not Santos this time. A younger crew member named Javier, new enough to smile with his whole face. "What can I get you?" "Hot tea," Malik says. "And if you have honey, great. If not, lemon is fine." Coming right up. While he waits, Malik glances toward the forward galley. He can see Santos conferring with the lead, their shoulders angled together, words masked by the soft white noise of air. He reads lips without meaning to. Years of crowded meetings and crisis briefings taught him to parse meaning from scraps. Santos says something like manifest and duplicate seat, then taps on a small tablet. Malik makes another note, ground-to-air handoff, system redundancy. If he were the kind of person who needed to be seen, he would march up, flash a badge, and make a point. But that's not how you learn. You don't learn by announcing yourself. You learn by letting the moment unfold and watching who protects whom, who apologizes, who doubles down. The tea arrives, a small cloud in a paper cup. Malik thanks Javier with eye contact, the kind that says, "I see you doing 3 jobs at once." He stirs honey into the steam, breathes it in, and the aroma takes him somewhere else. His mother's kitchen in Atlanta, where peppermint tea was first aid for everything from heartbreak to head colds. A dorm room where he once stayed up all night planning a startup that failed gracefully. A boardroom where he said no to an acquisition everybody said was the only move. He sips. The present returns, fully seated. In 6C, Claire checks the time. She should be revising her pitch deck, but the dopamine of a new beginning keeps tugging at her attention. She scrolls socials. A video from an influencer she doesn't even like slides onto the screen. A smiling lecture about perception is power. She nods along as if she's in conversation with the idea. And then, as if on cue, a toddler in the row ahead drops a plush giraffe into the aisle. It lands with a small, plaintive thud. The cabin doesn't notice. Claire does, but she looks away for a second longer than necessary, letting the moment decide whether it belongs to her. Before she can lean down, Malik is already unbuckled. A small, efficient detour. He picks up the giraffe, gives it a tiny bow as if it were a dignitary, and hands it back to the toddler with a whisper, "Guard this with your life." The kid giggles, a bright note clipped short by a parent's apology. "Sorry for the trouble," the mom says. "No trouble at all." Malik slides back into his seat like he hasn't moved. He has the clean, practiced economy of someone who has boarded more flights than he counts, who knows where to stand on the moving walkway so others can pass, who understands that courtesy is a form of intelligence. Claire sees this. She doesn't want to. It pinches something tender in her. Something about the way she entered the plane like it owed her something. She wants to be the kind of person who notices, who bends to retrieve the giraffe, who says the line that makes the kid smile. Instead, she was still memorizing the shape of her own victory. She exhales and opens her deck. A headline glares at her, "Culture as Competitive Advantage." The irony lands hard enough to leave a mark. The captain speaks, a voice in that register pilots use, calm enough to make storms apologize. Weather ahead, a minor detour, 20 minutes to arrival tacked onto the schedule like a post-it. A ripple of collective annoyance moves through the cabin and fades. Claire glances at her watch. She can afford 20 minutes, she tells herself. She can afford anything as long as she tells the story right later. But even as she thinks this, she feels prickly, as if the air around her has begun to ask questions. About the seat, about the laugh, about the joke that wasn't a joke. The TED Talk about empathy stares at her from the thumbnail row. Disappointed. Down in 9D, Malik is reading the in-flight magazine, not for the glossy features but for the letter from the CEO on page 1. It's a letter he wrote himself under a photograph of him smiling by a hangar door, though in this edition the photo is an older one because the new headshot didn't clear layout in time. He schemes the platitudes: safety, reliability, innovation, and pauses at the paragraph on belonging at 30,000 feet. He meant every word when he wrote it. He still does. But words are lighter than the choices that have to carry them. He is a paradox crammed into economy. A man who could have sat in 1A without anybody blinking, who intentionally booked 6C to watch the dance of boarding with the dancers, who accepted 9D because sometimes the only way to measure a temperature is to touch the stove. He hears the clink of ice in Claire's cup up front. Hears Santos speaking gently to a passenger who is nervous about the detour. Watches Javier refresh the service flow on the tablet, eyebrows knotted in concentration. Malik notes what the data won't show. The tone, the micropauses, the 1,000 ways people either give each other room or don't. Turmoil that isn't yet turbulence stirs beyond the windows. Clouds gather like an audience. The captain's voice returns, still calm but tighter now at the edges. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be turning on the seatbelt sign for the next few minutes while we navigate a bumpy patch. Flight attendants, please take your seats." The chime sounds like a decision being made. A heartbeat later, the plane shivers. Not a drop, but a shrug. Claire's fingers clutch the armrest reflexively. She hates that her body betrays her like this. "You're fine," she whispers to herself, as if confidence is a spell you can cast twice. Around her, the choreography changes. Carts locked, belts clicked, conversations clipped and stored. A tremor rolls through 14F and keeps going until the whole fuselage seems to be breathing. And then, because stories need moments and planes like to provide them, a voice rises from row 20. "Is there a doctor?" It's sharp enough to cut through the engine noise, soft enough to carry everything you're afraid to say. Heads turn. Eyes unglue from screens. Even the plane seems to listen. Malik is already up before the second sentence. He doesn't sprint. You don't sprint in turbulence unless you want to become a cautionary tale. But he moves with the certainty of a person who trusts his balance. "I'm not a doctor," he says to the flight attendant hustling down the aisle, "but I have medical training." What's happening? He has medical training because life demanded it. CEOs learn CPR after someone collapses in a conference hall. Sons learn it after fathers grab at their chests. Frequent flyers learn it because distance makes timing cruel. Claire watches him pass her row, jaw unclenched against another bump. Something dislodges in her. Something small and heavy and overdue. It isn't guilt yet. Guilt is too neat. It's more like recognition, the half-formed awareness that she didn't actually see him earlier. She saw a silhouette she filled in from memory. She unbuckles without thinking. The belt snaps her back like a friend yanking a sleeve. She stays put, palms warm, story slipping out of her control. By the time Malik reaches row 20, the attendants have cleared a space. A middle-aged man is slumped, face gray in the overhead light. His wife is breathing in tiny, panic sips. "He gets dizzy sometimes," she says. "He felt hot." And then, she gestures at the facts she can't say. "Sir, can you hear me?" Malik's voice goes deeper, not louder. He checks pulse, airway, the way you practice until you can do it with your eyes closed in the worst hallway of your life. "We need a doctor if there is one," he says over his shoulder. "Otherwise, oxygen, AED ready but not attached, water for the wife." The crew is already on it. Santos with the green bottle, Javier with the bright red case. Another attendant with a small cup steady in a trembling hand. A man from row 17 steps forward, white coat abandoned but confidence intact. "I'm a cardiologist," he says, producing the one sentence everyone is desperate to hear in the sky. Malik steps back but not away. "Doctor," he was semi-responsive, pulse thready. "Your lead." The plane bumps again, as if impatient. People switch from fear to fascination. Phones stay down because even the gossipers sense there are rules and then there are rules. Claire leans into the aisle, eyes pinned to the center of action. She doesn't know where this is going. She only knows that the man she moved has become the gravity in the room. What she does not know, not yet, is that this is the second reason he booked 6C. Not for a medical emergency specifically, you can't predict those, but for the chance to watch how his crews stored equipment, how they coordinated, how they handled the mess of humanity with both competence and heart. In the grid in his notebook, there's a box for emergency response, time to deploy AED, and another for passenger management, de-escalation and crowd control. He will fill them later, back on the ground, in ink that does not smudge. For now, he holds space. He is no one and also the person they will remember when they tell the story later, the way people remember the stranger who steadied the ladder or held the door. The cardiologist works. The wife exhales in uneven gratitude, and the plane rides the edge of weather toward a clearing that isn't just in the sky. 10-minute stretch like fresh gum on hot pavement. The cardiologist talks to the man gently, a prayer disguised as instruction. "Stay with me. You're doing great." The oxygen does its quiet, unshowy work. Color crawls back into a cheek. The wife's hands stop shaking long enough to stroke a forearm. The AED sits ready like a polite guest who hopes they won't be needed. The turbulence eases, then returns in a half-hearted ripple, as if embarrassed by its earlier tantrum. Santos manages the cabin with a calm that would make a storm take notes. "Ladies and gentlemen," she says over the PA, "we have a medical situation on board. We appreciate your cooperation staying seated so our team can assist. We'll keep you updated." Her tone slicks anxiety from the air. Malik notes it, filing away a quiet admiration that will turn into something useful later. A training scenario with her voice as the baseline. A memo about how the best people are already doing the job they dream of, even if the job description hasn't caught up. Claire closes her laptop on the slide titled, "Assumptions cost more than you think." The irony is now a marching band. She watches Malik stand beside the cardiologist like a steadying pillar, tracking the sequence of steps the way an engineer watches a bridge in high wind. He asks for water for the wife, then shifts to block a curious passenger's view without making it a scene. He listens. He doesn't perform. He looks like a person who knows two truths at once. that he is not the hero of this moment and that his presence still matters. When the man finally blinks awake with purpose, the wife breathes the kind of breath that you wish came preloaded on every plane, relief with a gratitude chaser. The cabin sighs as one organism. Even the baby in row 14 goes quiet for a beat, like the whole sky consented to let joy through customs. The cardiologist nods. I think he fainted. Could be dehydration. We should have him checked on the ground. But he's stable. The AED is reholstered. Oxygen turned low. Crisis shelved. Applause threatens but doesn't quite form. Santos meets Malik's eyes. Thank you, she says. Not oversold, just precise. Really? Team effort, he replies. You ran it right. He returns to 9D, and the aisle closes with the soft murmur of seatbelts and resumed podcasts. Claire tracks him the whole way, the way you track a person who suddenly possesses a piece of your attention you didn't consent to loan out. She wants to say something, but the aisle is too public, apology too heavy for this altitude. Words fail her, which is new and humbling. The captain comes on again, voice lighter. Thanks for your patience. We're through the worst of it. We'll be descending shortly. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for arrival. A rustle of wrappers, the click of tray tables, the rusted creak of old habits letting go. Javier moves past Claire, collecting cups. She whispers, "Is the gentleman okay?" He nods. Thanks to a good team. Out the window, the city receives them. Runways like lines on an open palm, terminal buildings squared like Lego blocks. Claire's stomach does the tiny hello it always does on descent. She thinks about the story she was going to tell at dinner tonight to make people laugh. Maybe she won't tell it after all. Or maybe she will tell it differently, smaller, with the part where she says I was wrong on purpose. Touchdown. Reverse thrust like an argument we survived. The plane slows, then taxis, then pauses for reasons no one will ever explain satisfactorily. People reach for their phones as if they've been underwater. The baby in 14F starts again as if on cue. The seatbelt chime dings, and everyone forgets what patience felt like 5 minutes ago. Overhead bins yaw open. A bag threatens to leap onto a passenger skull but is caught by a vigilant hand. Malik's, of course, and reholstered with a nod. And then the thing happens that turns a plane full of stories into one story with witnesses. The forward door opens. A rectangle of daylight becomes a stage. 2 ground staff stand there. Postures snap to attention but faces lit by real smiles. A woman in an airport blazer steps in just far enough to be seen by row 1 and heard by row 3. Welcome back, Mr. Hart, she says, warm but formal, as if she has rehearsed halfway and decided to let the rest be human. Heads swivel like sunflowers. Mr. Hart? Claire blinks, mouth open a fraction. She looks down the aisle at 9D and watches as Malik stands. Not grandly, just fully. The captain is already moving toward him. Hand outstretched, relief and respect mingled on his face. Good to see you, sir, the captain says. Apologies for the weather and the situation. You handled it well, Malik replies. The words aren't a benediction. They are an assessment delivered with kindness. Row 4 whispers to row 5. Row 6 tries to be cool and fails. Someone in 3B, who watches business news the way other people watch cooking shows, finally places the face with the name. Is that Malik Hart, the CEO? He mutters to his seatmate, forgetting that whispers on planes are just smaller louds. But the blazer woman's next line lands like a headline. Our owner is on board today, she says to Santos in a tone that tries and fails to be neutral. We've alerted the gate team. Owner, not just CEO. Owner. The word changes the pressure in the cabin. Claire feels her cheeks go warm. Her body registers what her mind is slow to accept. The man you displaced, the man you dismissed, the man you imagined up from your own mental templates, owns the entire airline. And he didn't throw it at you. He didn't even tug on the thread of power that would have unraveled your certainty. He chose 9D and a notebook. He chose to help a stranger breathe. People part in that respectful, chaotic way crowds do when proximity to power mixes with decency. Malik doesn't rush. He thanks Javier again, shakes the cardiologist's hand, and says to Santos in a voice pitched to include the whole row, "I'll send a note to your supervisor, but also I'll send it to you because too many compliments evaporate up the chain. You were excellent." Santos flushes, a relief and a pride blooming at the same time. Claire watches all of it and then watches herself as if given an out-of-body view. The scene reframes the seat incident with merciless clarity. She wants to hide in the overhead bin and also step forward at once. She does neither long enough to make the moment choose for her. "Mr. Hart?" she says, voice smaller than her usual but steady. He turns, and those kind eyes meet hers without agenda. Earlier there was a seat mix-up. I insisted on keeping the aisle. I was not gracious." The cabin becomes a classroom without desks. Even the baby pauses in an uncanny show of narrative timing. Claire inhales. "I'm sorry." The apology is short, not a paragraph auditioning for absolution. Malik studies her for half a second, not to measure her worth, but to decide whether to tell a story that helps. "Airports are stress amplifiers," he says finally, a gentle line that recognizes the human truth without excusing the choice. "And still, we choose who we are in the amplified moments." "I chose badly," she says. "You can choose better next time." He offers it like a door left unlocked. He doesn't sign it with a lecture. He doesn't add, "Also, I could have made a phone call and put you in 32E out of spite." He just stands there in the space where grace feels like fresh air. Claire nods, a new muscle forming somewhere you can't see on an X-ray. The aisle moves again, the way rivers do once a fallen tree is cleared. People begin their slow parade toward daylight. Malik is invited to deplane first. He declines and gestures to the cardiologist, who shakes his head and says the magic sentence, "Patients first." The couple from row 20 are escorted out gently, the wife mouthing thank you to the cabin like a benediction. Finally, the front rows peel away and the plane empties into a gate area that smells faintly of pretzels and possibility. Claire steps out and is surprised by the reception as much as the man himself. A handful of station managers cluster with the energy of people about to be graded on a test they didn't know they took. Malik shakes hands, says hello to 2 ramp agents by name, and asks about a baggage belt that has a temperamental streak. He has walked these halls with clipboards and without cameras. Today there are phones half-raised, but he treats them like weather, present, not determinant. He turns again to Santos. "Let's do a quick huddle in 5, he says, then catches himself. "After you debrief with the captain." "I'll wait." The sentence is small and enormous at once. "I'll wait" is what power rarely says, and what makes everything after it sound different. Claire drifts to the side, unsure if her story is over or only beginning. She texts Ari, "Recruiter. Landed. I'll call later. Something happened on the plane. I have thoughts." Ari replies with a gif of a dancing bear and the words, "Spill later." Claire stares at the little dots that never come. She pockets the phone and instead watches a different kind of conversation. The kind where a company reveals itself in the spaces between words. They gather near gate B14, a pocket of airport that feels like a borrowed conference room. Santos, Javier, the captain, the cardiologist by coincidence because his connection is late, and 2 ground staff with the nervous cheer of people hoping they guessed right more than wrong today. Malik isn't center stage. He is simply present the way a good coach is present, visible enough to matter, quiet enough to let others hear themselves. "First," Malik says, "thank you. You ran the medical correctly. Communication was clear, equipment was where it needed to be, and your tone did more than your tools." He nods to Santos. "You anchored the cabin." To Javier, "Your tablet flow was clean and you read the room." To the captain, "Your updates were timely. Passengers felt carried, not dragged." Praise is a currency he spends deliberately, aware that inflation exists here too. He turns then, not scolding, exploring. "We had a duplicate seat assignment in 6C. System glitch, sure. But glitches are where culture shows up. I want to know how that felt at your level." Santos exhales. "We see that once a month, maybe twice. Usually it's easy if one party is flexible. Today, there was tension." "Tension?" Malik echoes, letting the word be fat enough to hold the truth. Claire stands at the perimeter and hears it all as if audited by Grace. She expects a glance in her direction, a public shaming dressed as a lesson. It never comes. Instead, Malik keeps the aperture wide. What tools do you need when tension shows up? Scripting? Discretionary credits? A fast escalate path to gate. Discretionary credits help, Santos says. But the tone is the thing. People need to feel seen. And sometimes, to be honest, we slip. We're human. Exactly, Malik says. That's where we design for forgiveness. For you, for them. I want our playbook to assume mess and still produce dignity. He looks at the ground staff lead. On the manifest side, I want a check that catches duplicate assignments at scan and pings the gate instantly. No more discovering it in row 6 with a line behind you and overhead bins fighting gravity. Ground lead nods, already texting someone because fixes start as texts before they become code. Malik continues, and on culture, we have a line in our onboarding that says, "We seek people, not profiles." I want that line to be a practice, not a poster. That means language training, bias interrupts, and a set of rituals that make belonging tangible. He smiles, small and real. Like learning to pronounce names correctly the first time. Like looking at the human before the status. Claire feels that one like a quiet bell rung in her chest. Looking at the human before the status. She looked at what she thought was a status, hers, and forgot the human across from her. She steps in, finally, because courage exercised late is still courage. "Mr. Hart," she says. "May I add something?" The circle pivots. He nods. "I was the passenger in 6C, she says. "I made it harder than it had to be. I was stressed and assumed the worst in someone I didn't know. I'm sorry to the crew for adding static you didn't need, and to you, sir, for the moment I chose to be less than I want to be." No one claps. Thank God. No one throws her a gold star for basic decency. Santos simply says, "Thank you." Javier's shoulders loosen a notch. The captain gives a half-smile that says he's seen worse endings. Malik studies Claire again, then offers her the one thing that makes apologies useful. A next step. "Airports show us ourselves," he says. "You're not the first to dislike the mirror. What matters is what you do after." "I'll do the after part," she says. "I'll tell the story right. Tell it whole," Malik says. "People don't change because they hear a sermon. They change because they recognize themselves and want to edit the draft." He turns back to the team. 2 action items. He says, the CEO part of his brain clicking into the cadence that makes people believe fixes are not hypothetical. 1. Product flag for seat duplication. I want to build the sprint, even if it's an ugly stopgap before the elegant fix. 2. We'll roll out a dignity at gate micro-training. 10 minutes, story-based, focused on tone and tactics. We'll pay you for the time because we respect labor with more than applause. The ground lead nods with the relief of someone who expected a blame hunt and got a blueprint instead. The captain checks his watch. Duty time is a jealous god. They break with handshakes and that curious buoyancy you get when a hard thing went not perfectly but well enough to feel like progress. Claire lingers. Malik starts to move, then stops, as if remembering something he meant to say earlier and saved for a non-public moment. "One more thing," he says to her. "About status. Owning the airline doesn't make me more important than anyone on that plane. It makes me more responsible. That's the only meaning of power I trust." She swallows. "I'll remember that." She thinks of all the ways she was trained, subtly and not, to equate power with the right to take space, to claim aisles and narratives and air. She thinks of a toddler's giraffe and a stranger's oxygen and a sentence about airports being amplifiers. She feels embarrassingly like crying in an airport, which is hardly rare but still inconvenient. "Can I ask you something?" she says. "Sure. Why did you take the move to row 9 without pushing back?" She asks it not to absolve, but to learn. He smiles. 2 reasons. 1, I wanted to see how our crew handled redistribution under pressure. You learn different things in the back than you do in the front. 2, I don't like the person I become when I flex because I can. I've met him. He's efficient and he gets results and he breaks things you don't see until later. She nods, An answer that will outlast the day, settling into a place where it can do work. Thank you, she says. It's both too small and exactly right. He gestures toward the concourse where humanity surges like a tide with carry-ons. Go make your connection, he says. And your correction. She laughs, a sound that isn't armor this time. I will. They part. He heads toward a smaller conference room to debrief with operations and the union rep who has thoughts about the jump seat allocation on full flights. She heads toward a coffee stand she doesn't need, because ritual sometimes makes change stick. In line, a man cuts in front of her with the confidence of someone who never notices he's cutting. She inhales, taps his shoulder, and says, "Hey, I think I was next." He blinks, surprised, then acquiesces with a shrug. It's a tiny thing. It's also everything. And that's the part you carry out of an airport. Not the applause you didn't get or the upgrade you did. The choice you made when no one was filming. The edit to your draft. As the camera pulls back and the terminal becomes a mosaic of stories, we leave you with the moment that started all of this. A seat, a laugh, a choice, and the moment that transformed it. A hand on an AED, a voice that said team effort, a sentence about responsibility. Those are the rails the story runs on from here. If the story hit you somewhere true, if it nudged you to rethink the snap judgments we make in cramped aisles and in wider life, do one small thing for us and a big thing for yourself. Hit subscribe, drop a like so this message reaches more people, and share in the comments a time you misread a situation and what you did after. Not because we collect confessionals, but because your after can be someone else's map. And if you want more true-to-life stories told with heart and a little heat, you know what to do. Subscribe, like, and ring that bell so you don't miss what lands next. The airport eats hours the way oceans eat shorelines, wave by small wave. But Claire moves through it with a different cadence now, as if someone quietly changed the soundtrack. She buys coffee she doesn't need just to have a moment to stand still, then tosses it after 2 sips because her mouth tastes like realization more than caffeine. On a bench by gate C7, she drafts a message to the airline's customer care address, deletes it, rewrites it without the armor, and finally sends the version that says the thing plainly. Your crew was excellent. I was not. Please pass special thanks to Flight Attendant R. Santos and to the captain for clear comms during a medical emergency. Also, this is uncomfortable to admit, but I insisted on keeping an aisle seat during a duplicate assignment and handled it badly. I'm already telling the story differently to myself. Less flattering, more accurate. If you have a recognition program, I'll happily add my name to it. She signs it with her full name, not the scrubbed, breezy signature she uses when she wants to seem lighter than she is. It's a tiny act, but tiny acts reroute rivers. Her layover burns down, and the connection boards on time. Somewhere at the other end of that second flight, elevators and glass and hand sanitizer line up like beads on a string. She's headed to an interview she thought would be just another gladiator pit dressed up as a conversation. Ari. Recruiter meets her in the lobby with a grin that tries to calm and a clipboard that threatens to hurry. You got this, Ari whispers, and for the first time in a long time Claire believes encouragement means be the better draft of yourself rather than perform the polished one. The hiring manager, Miranda, is the kind of person who has sharpened her kindness into a tool. She offers water, sits, and opens with a curveball. We'll get to your accomplishments, she says. But first, tell me about a time you discovered something unflattering about your own behavior and then did something useful with that information. Claire's smile twitches. The universe has a sense of humor so dry it chafes. She thinks about reaching for an old story, some minor conflict she navigated with a bow on it. She doesn't. She tells the plain story, not as a confessional designed to harvest points, not as a morality play with herself as the penitent star, but as a sequence of choices under pressure and what those choices revealed. She tells it the way Malik advised without knowing he advised her, whole. She includes the laugh that wasn't kind, the way her body grabbed the armrest during turbulence, the giraffe in the aisle, the oxygen bottle's quiet authority. She tells about the reveal without adding glitter to it, about grace offered without invoice, about the sentence that won't stop ringing. We choose who we are in the amplified moments. Miranda listens the way a good crowd listens to jazz. Leaning in, letting notes break, not tapping ahead to where she expects the beat to land. When Claire is done, Miranda doesn't clap. God bless professionalism. But she does nod once, slowly. That's a hard story to tell, right? She says. Because the main character isn't flattering herself and still claiming responsibility. I'm interested in people who can revise themselves without turning the revision into a brand. She flips a page. Let's talk craft now. You wrote in your materials that culture is a competitive advantage. Tell me how that looks on Tuesday afternoon when everyone's tired. Claire talks policies, sure, but more than policies, she talks rituals. She talks about how belonging moves from a poster to a practice when people learn how to pronounce names on day one, when managers are trained to narrate uncertainty rather than pretend omniscience, when meetings start with 30-second human weather reports so you know who's raining and who's sunny without making feelings the only deliverable. She sketches a tiny playbook on Miranda's whiteboard. 5 lines, each a hinge. Assume mess plus design for dignity. Bias interrupt. What's the other story that could also be true? Praise with receipts. Critique with a map. When you mess up, own it in front of the smallest possible audience that still counts. Responsibility, importance. She hears her own voice and knows she is borrowing Malik's cadence without meaning to. She doesn't mind. We all inherit syntax from the people who changed our weather. There are questions about numbers, and she answers with numbers you can taste. Retention curves shaped like gentle descents rather than cliffs. Microsurveys that look like EKGs, a pilot, lowercase p. She quips, and Miranda actually smiles. Program that put frontline employees in the same rooms as product managers for 4 Fridays and shaved 9 points off a frustration metric that had calcified. The interview moves not like a fight, more like a dance with clear signals. When it ends, Miranda stands, shakes her hand, and says, regardless of what happens next on our side, I recommend you keep telling that plain story to yourself for a while. Not because of the drama, because it's a mirror you can travel with. Outside, Ari pounces. How'd it go? Claire exhales. A ribbon of air that leaves room for tomorrow. I didn't audition for perfection, she says. I auditioned for growth. Ari squints at her. When did you become a fortune cookie? They laugh, but there's relief in it. On the train back to her borrowed sublet, Claire's phone vibrates with an email from Aurelia Air Care and Crew. She expects a boilerplate thanks for your feedback. It isn't. We appreciate your message. Recognition has been posted to our Santos and crew of FLT 417. Also, Mr. Hart asked us to thank you for sending a note that told the story fully. Safe travels. There's no flourish, no invitation to join a loyalty program, just a line that says we saw your after. She sits back, watching her reflection shiver in the window as tunnels eat daylight and spit it back in chopped pieces. She doesn't feel like a redeemed protagonist. She feels like someone who got a rehearsal and decided to use it. Later that week, she's early for a flight on a different airline with a cheaper fare. She watches a boarding agent apologize to a passenger like he's reading a script written in a language he barely speaks. The apology doesn't land. It drifts sideways and falls between them. Claire steps out of line to give the pair space. She's not going to meddle, but she makes a note to notice. Tone is a technology. She thinks about dignity at gate microtrainings and wonders if companies can actually teach posture, not just procedure. She thinks about who she is when no one knows her name. At home, she opens a blank document and types a title she would have mocked a week ago. Amplified moments. She writes not because anyone asked for content, but because stories domesticate lessons. Give them a place to sleep so they don't roam the house breaking things. The first paragraph refuses to be neat, good. She lets it spill, then tidies enough to see the shape. When she's done, she doesn't post it. She reads it out loud, then deletes 2 sentences that tried too hard to be forgiven. She's learning. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the city, in a room with too much HVAC and not enough windows, Malik meets with operations and union reps and product leads whose eyes are bright with either curiosity or defensiveness. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference at first glance. He thanks people by name, asks questions that don't have gotcha traps hidden in them, and then draws an ugly diagram on a whiteboard that makes immediate sense. This is where the duplicate seat detection should fire, he says, tapping a rectangle labeled scan. It routes a ping to gate, not cabin. Cabin gets a heads-up banner that reads, 6C up. Gate engaged, ETA helper in 60 seconds. That way the flight attendant doesn't have to be the absorber of all confusion with a line of passengers as witnesses. We remove some theater from the conflict. Product-led raises a hand. It's hacky. Malik grins. Yes, elegance can come next. Dignity first. Union rep nods. Not because hacks are his favorite, but because hacks are often the first answer to "we heard you." They talk about culture. Not in the airbrushed way companies like to talk about it when they're framing posters, but in the gritty way that admits how bias sneaks in like fog and settles where you least expect. They talk about boarding as a performance, about how everyone is an actor even if they didn't audition. Passengers trying on competence or control or charm, crew trying on calm like a uniform under the uniform, leaders choosing whether to be ushers or critics. They argue a little, the good kind, the kind where voices rise and then lower because people realize that raised voices don't make ideas taller. They leave with assignments and a sense that next Tuesday might feel different. One night close to midnight, Malik's phone lights up with a text from an unknown number that begins, "I wasn't sure whether to send this, but I decided the worst thing that can happen is you ignore it." He almost ignores it. Boundary management is part of self-respect. He doesn't, because curiosity is also part of self-respect. It's Claire. She thanks him for the sentence about responsibility. She doesn't ask for anything. She wishes him good luck with whatever it is he's building and says if he ever wants a civilian's perspective on how dignity at gate lands, she's a free beta tester with recent experience being the problem and trying to be the solution. He smiles at the screen, types appreciated, and puts the phone face down like a ritual. The world doesn't tilt on its axis. Planes still leave late. People still elbow past each other to get to row numbers painted on the plane like promises. But a few weeks later, when the prototype pings at gate D12 and the agent sees 6C dup, helper in 45 seconds and radios for a red vest who appears fast enough to make friction feel managed. A passenger who might have been a Claire a month ago gets to choose a different version of themselves in a quieter room. That's how culture changes. Not with viral videos or slogans, but with slightly altered Tuesdays that accrete into new weather. And because stories like to circle back, Claire ends up on an Aurelia flight again. Not by design, just because the schedule fit and the price wasn't the worst. She boards early because she left early, and when she finds 10C occupied by a nervous-looking college kid clutching a crumpled boarding pass, she feels the heat of a familiar impulse rise and then watches it cool as quickly as breath on glass. "Hey," she says gently. "I think I'm in 10C. Want to check yours together?" He shows her a pass that reads 10C, printed with an ink ribbon that's smudged. She smiles. "We'll call the cavalry." She signals to the attendant, who works a quiet process that looks suspiciously like the hack Malik sketched on a whiteboard. A ping, a helper, a calm. The kid ends up in 11C with a credit and a story that doesn't require a villain. Claire sits down and feels nothing like triumph and everything like relief. When Wheels Up comes and the city falls away, she opens amplified moments on her laptop and adds one more paragraph. Not the kind of paragraph that makes you cry. The kind that makes you nod and then change one small thing on Thursday. All hands day at Aurelia looks like a swarm of dots converging on a map. Pilots landing reserve flights 10 minutes early, crews joining from quiet hotel rooms with blackout curtains, baggage handlers tuning in on a laptop balanced on a break room microwave, headquarters staff clustering under light fixtures that buzz like bees with opinions. The agenda slide is a rectangle of corporate normalcy until it isn't. Dignity first. From slogan to system. Someone somewhere groans preemptively. Malik steps up without fanfare. He has long ago run out of interest in artificial drum rolls. He tells 3 short stories. The first is ancient by corporate standards. The time a gate agent let an elderly passenger board first, not because the policy said so, but because the passenger's hands were shaking and the agent recognized his own father's hands in them. "We didn't teach that," Malik says. "His life did. Our job is to notice and amplify, not standardize it into oblivion." The second is new. Duplicate seats that used to escalate in public now get rerouted to private fix, with a 35% drop in heated tone events. A hilariously bureaucratic metric that still means something human. "This is a hack," he reminds them. "But it's our hack. Ugly and useful. We'll design the elegant version later. Remember, elegance should serve dignity, not the other way around." The third is Messier. He talks about bias without a safe word. He describes the way our brains take the shortest path through the forest and sometimes miss the clearing where nuance lives. He names the harm of snap judgments done at scale. Then he says, "We're not scolding. We're building guardrails. Because we all drive tired sometimes." He unveils 10-minute micro-trainings that look like sitcoms and feel like mirrors. He announces that time spent on them is paid and that managers are measured on whether learning turned into different Tuesdays. There's a murmur that sounds like resistance draining into curiosity. It's the nicest sound he's heard in months. After Q&A, for genuine questions, one grandstanding disguised as a question, one logistics thing that should have been an email, he closes his laptop and stands there not quite ready to leave the stage. He doesn't usually do personal. Today, he does just enough. "I own this airline," he says. "But the only piece of power I trust is responsibility. I'm responsible for the sky we build inside these planes. I'm responsible for the choices our systems encourage. I'm responsible for what we tolerate and what we teach. If you see me forget that, tell me. We'll correct the draft." The chat lights up with emojis and also with words, which he prefers. A ramp agent writes, "Thanks for not talking to us like posters." A junior analyst writes, "I'm here for ugly then better." A flight attendant named R. Santos sends nothing at all. She's on duty, walking an aisle, resetting a tray when a passenger's elbow refuses to share. Her training isn't a video, though she watched the video. Her training is 1,000 choices she can feel in her muscles now. Outside the company, the world goes on noticing or not noticing itself. Claire's interview turns into an offer that turns into a first day that turns into a calendar full of rooms where people are trying to sell ideas to each other without losing themselves in the pitch. She brings amplified moments into one of those rooms, not as a monologue, more like a mirror. She asks the team a question she stole shamelessly. What's the other story that could also be true? The room slows just enough to choose better. One evening she and Ari split fries in a bar that smells like winning teams and yesterday's floors. So the plane thing, Ari says finally, "You gonna talk about it publicly?" Claire shrugs. "Maybe. It feels like a story that belongs to a crew more than to me. But I'll keep telling it to myself until it becomes a reflex." Ari raises a glass. Two reflexes. They clink, a small ceremony for everyday vows. On a runway where heat shimmers like a rumor, an Aurelia plane lifts into air that isn't always kind. In row 12, a stranger helps another stranger he'll never see again stow a bag that wants to gravity itself into a bruise. In row 6, someone chooses to ask rather than assume. In the galley, Santos shows a new hire how to anchor a cabin with a voice that doesn't apologize for existing. In headquarters, a product manager refactors a hack into something less ugly without sanding off its humility. In a quiet office at the end of a day that looked like 3 days taped together, Malik takes a call from a union rep who begins, "I think you're going to hate this." And he says, "Try me." Because he means it. And yes, you with the headphones on, scrolling past airport stories to the next thing, you know exactly what this is about because it's almost never about planes. It's about choosing who you are in amplified moments. It's about catching yourself mid-snap and editing the draft. It's about understanding that being right is a small prize compared to being responsible. If anything in this story hit home, if it nudged you to rethink the quick judgments we all make in cramped aisles and in wider life, do one easy, powerful thing right now. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story that flips a script. Tap the like button so this lesson about dignity finds its way into more feeds. And drop a comment with a moment you edited your own draft, what happened, what you learned, what you do again. We read every one, and your story might be the map someone else needs on their next Tuesday. Ring the bell, stick around, and let's keep building skies on planes and on the ground, where responsibility is the only kind of power that matters. News rarely travels in straight lines anymore. It seeps, it jumps, it mutates. A gate agent posts a cryptic gratitude on a closed crew forum about an owner who waited instead of waving a badge. A cardiologist's resident mentions, offhand at morning rounds, wild night on a plane. Teamwork actually worked. A passenger shares a blurry photo of a man in a navy jacket steadying a falling carry-on, captioned, "When the guy in 9D has main character energy for the right reasons." It gets a little traction, then a little more until someone asks the internet's favorite question, "Who is this?" and the internet supplies 100 wrong answers before wandering toward the right one. Malik's comms lead asks, gently, if he wants to get in front of it with a tidy narrative. Human stories test well. Shareholders like their heroes photogenic. Malik shakes his head. We don't manufacture humility, he says. If it wants to live, it'll live without us poking it. He drafts a note to internal. If approached by media about FLT 417, refer to comms. We're proud of the crew. We don't do victory laps for doing our jobs. The note is both a shield and a mirror. People see themselves in it and make choices accordingly. Claire sees the chatter, recognizes the outline, and resists the urge to quote tweet her own growth. That's a new muscle. She writes instead to a small circle, Ari, two friends who don't monetize each other's moments. I met a version of myself on that plane that I didn't like. I'm working on a different draft. One friend replies, welcome to the club. Dues are paid in Tuesdays. Ari sends back a row of clapping hands and the unglamorous question that keeps real friendships honest. What are you actually changing? Meanwhile, Aurelia quietly pilots Dignity at gate in 3 airports that have reputations. One for weather, one for tempers, one for being the end of a long line of bad days. The training looks nothing like a compliance video. It looks like a scene from a show everyone swears they don't watch and then quotes later. Actors playing passengers with too much story in their eyes. Crew reacting with instincts polished by repetition. The script includes a duplicate seat moment that lands like a wink for those who know. The facilitator, a former FA with comic timing and scars from 1,000 aisles, pauses after the heat spike in the scene and asks, okay, what's the smallest useful next sentence? Hands go up with lines that avoid gasoline. I hear you. Let me get you privacy. I'm pulling in the gate to fix the manifest. You shouldn't have to perform this. You booked this seat for a reason. We'll keep it aisle. They workshop tone like it's a tool that needs sharpening because it is. There are bumps. A supervisor accuses the program of pampering passengers who, in his view, need firmness. Malik listens longer than the point requires and asks, what's firmness that doesn't humiliate? The supervisor, confronted with the poverty of his vocabulary for care, says he'll try the module with his team and come back with better words. A union rep insists on guardrails that protect crew from weaponized complaints. Malik agrees before the sentence finishes and adds reporting changes that make patterns visible without turning every bad afternoon into a career trial. Elegance can come later. Safety comes now. A week in, metrics scribble their first stories. Heat events dip where red vest helpers arrive fast. Gate agents report less public theater, which is to say fewer scenes performed for a line with phones in hand. In one airport, a passenger writes, it felt like the airline had a plan for friction, not just excuses. In another, a crew member jokes in the debrief, I said the line, we seat people, not profiles, and for once it wasn't a poster. It was the room. Malik reads the Daily Digest from his couch. Shoes off, notes app open. He adds a line to a personal document titled Power I Don't Use. I didn't correct the stranger who cut in front of me at security today. I tapped his shoulder and said, I think I was next, and then let it go when he apologized instead of performing my injury for an audience. It's a silly list and the most serious thing he writes. Power is a muscle. Unexercised, it atrophies in the best way. He calls his mother in Atlanta because he likes the sound of their conversations ending without agenda. She listens to the summary and then, as mothers do, reduces it to a sentence that fits in a pocket. Baby, you can't fix people, she says. But you can make it easier for them to choose their better selves. He grins. She's just given him the tagline he didn't know he needed. On a gray Thursday, a journalist with a record of getting complicated corporate stories mostly write emails comms asking for comment on rumors that Aurelia's owner intervened in a medical situation and declined special treatment. Comms drafts a vanilla reply. Malik edits it with 4 strokes. Crew followed protocol. A passenger with medical training assisted until a doctor arrived. We're proud of our teams on good days and the harder ones. No further comment. It's both less and more than the story the journalist wanted. Sometimes restraint is the news. Claire's own ripple is smaller and oddly more consequential. In a weekly check-in at her new job, her manager offhandedly asserts that a vendor is sloppy. Claire, catching the snap forming in her own mouth, asks, "What's the other story that could also be true?" The room does that startled silence that means you interrupted a ritual. Then someone says, "They've been short-staffed since the acquisition." And someone else says, "Our specs changed twice." And the sloppy collapses into specifics that can be fixed. After, a colleague she barely knows stops by her desk and says, "Thanks for buying us 3 seconds to think." Claire shrugs. Tuesdays. And because stories prefer circles to lines, a DM pings from someone with a profile photo of a sky scene from a jump seat. "I think I was your FA on 417. I'm our Santos. Just wanted to say thanks for the note you sent. Those usually go up the chain and evaporate. This one didn't." Claire types back, "I'm glad it landed where it should have. You ran the cabin like a lighthouse." Santos replies with a laughing emoji and, "Stealing that for my bio. The world does not change. The world changes." Both can be true, and the proof lives in edges. A duplicate seat caught at scan. A manager who asks a better question. A comment section where, for once, the top-liked reply says, "I changed my mind reading this." By month's end, the hack wants to become a system. Hacks are impatient like that. They either die or evolve. Product, ops, and union meet in a room that smells like coffee and complicity. On the whiteboard, a flow with sticky notes for pixels and arrows for feelings. At the top, in Malik's handwriting, "Dignity first, elegance next." Underneath, smaller, "Don't let perfect be the enemy of people." They map the duplicate seat prevention properly this time. Scan at gate hits a service that cross-checks active seats. If a collision, it triggers resolve mode. Freeze assignment, flash a private banner at the boarding pass scanner that says, "Seat conflict detected. Redirect passenger to desk B." The passenger doesn't have to perform confusion at the threshold of the plane. The plane is a sanctuary again, or at least a sanctuary-adjacent aluminum tube. The desk agent gets a script that isn't a script so much as a recipe. Affirm, explain, offer equal or better seat, attach tangible recompense, do it out of the spotlight. The KPI isn't speed. It's agitation reduced per minute. They measure it with a crude slider on the agent screen, low/med/high, to be replaced later with something smarter. Ugly first, better next. Union wisdom sneaks in through the side door, as it tends to when you invite it early. A rep named Rhea who flew for 12 years before becoming everyone's favorite thorn says, "Don't make the agent pick between being humane and being dinged for delay." She points at a SLA that turns compassion into a metric to be gamed. Ops winces. Product erases and redraws with an exception window that recognizes the physics of human moments. Malik says, "We'll take the hit at the on-time stat if the dignity stat goes up." A finance person coughs. "We don't have a dignity stat." Malik smiles. "We do now." He doesn't know exactly how to measure it yet. He knows exactly how to prioritize it. Training V2 borrows from theater more brazenly. Scenes end mid-sentence and the facilitator points to the room. "You're up." People hate it and then don't. A grizzled captain who has flown through weather that would make mountains reconsider their posture volunteers a line that becomes canon. "Announce what you know, name what you don't, and promise the next checkpoint." It's perfect because it's humble. Passengers don't need divinity from the cockpit. They need humanity. In an airport that used to be famous for making people cry, a red vest helper arrives in 50 seconds. A small miracle delivered by nothing divine, just a paging tweak and route optimization. The agent says, "Let's fix this where it's not a show," and you can feel the temperature drop. A woman who would have performed a grievance in the aisle for an audience that loves such theater instead tells a quieter truth at a desk. She's afraid of middle seats because she's claustrophobic. The fix is a new seat and not being made to audition her fear. Everyone wins, especially the people not forced to become an audience. Malik walks terminals the way some executives walk spreadsheets, with intent, with affection, with a willingness to be wrong. He wears a badge that says operations because titles are loud in rooms that need listening. He stops at a baggage claim because a conveyor belt has the personality of a sulking child. He watches as a ramp team lead chooses to go explain a delay to waiting passengers instead of hiding behind "Please see desk." It takes 90 seconds and prevents 45 minutes of complaint escalations. Malik writes in his notebook, respect is time travel. Spend it now or spend 3 times as much later. On a red eye, he sits next to a software engineer from another world who, after learning what he does, says, airlines are basically distributed systems with unreliable networks and hostile inputs. Malik laughs a little too hard because, yes, they talk failure modes. They swap war stories about recovering from partial outages that expose assumptions no one realized were assumptions. Before landing, the engineer says, your dignity-first framing is just optimized for tail latency of human experience. Malik adds a line to his private dictionary. Sometimes jargon is just a new door into the same room. The first press piece finally lands, surprisingly fair. It doesn't name Claire, no one outside that plane should. It doesn't oversaint Malik, which would be a different kind of lie. It frames the story as systems and choices, not a hero's halo. The top comment reads, I work ramp at Aurelia. We're rough around the edges, but lately I feel like leadership's trying to sand the right ones. Malik sends the reporter a 2-sentence thank you and goes back to the whiteboard because stories are not product launches. They are invitations to work. And then there are the misshapes that test whether the work is muscle or mood. In Phoenix, a temp agent misreads resolve mode and announces the duplicate seat to a full boarding lane like a carnival barker. It spikes heat and gives someone the worst 30 seconds of their week. The incident report lands on Malik's desk with all the right form fields filled. He calls the station, not to breathe fire, but to ask the most important question in incident analysis. What did we make easy that should have been hard? What did we make hard that should have been easy? The station chief admits the signage is confusing and the training deck buried the lead. Malik says, fix it ugly by Friday. We'll ship pretty next sprint. They do. The next week, heat dips again. At a town hall, an agent stands up and asks, do we really think people can change in the 5 minutes before a flight? Malik doesn't dodge. Not all at once, he says, but we can make it easier for the better version to show up. We can lower the friction to grace. The room is quiet the way rooms are when someone names a thing they've only felt. By quarter's end, the slide deck that summarizes progress is satisfyingly boring. Fewer aisle confrontations, shorter time to medical response, higher felt-seen scores on microsurveys. An internal message board thread with 300 quiet stories that will never trend and matter more than anything that would. A bullet at the bottom says, we now have a dignity stat. It is imperfect. It is real. Flights are practice disguised as logistics. Claire discovers this on a Tuesday she almost ruins and then doesn't. She's at the airport early on purpose now, not because anxiety is driving. In line at security, a man behind her mutters something sharp when an elderly couple fumbles with bins. The old Claire would have rolled her eyes privately and texted a friend a snarky play-by-play. The current draft turns, smiles without sugar, and says, we can all give them a minute. He grumbles and then does. Microactivism so small it barely qualifies as a word. She files it under better reflex. At the gate, the screen flickers, equipment change, row reshuffle, the kind of disruption that makes tempers audition for roles. A red vest arrives quickly, resolve mode at work, and the energy drops instead of spikes. Claire watches the choreography with appreciation that isn't performative. When it's her turn to board, a familiar voice catches her ear. I know that posture, Santos says with a grin, scanning her pass. You look like someone trying not to help but ready to if needed. Claire laughs. Caught. They have 30 seconds to chat. At gates, conversations are haikus. How's the training? Claire asks. Honestly, Santos's eyes crinkle. It helps. Not the videos so much as the permission. We got phrases now that fit in our mouths when the moment gets loud. And the owner keeps showing up without showing off. That matters. Claire nods. Tell him his line about amplified moments turned into a workshop at my job. Santos raises an eyebrow. Stealing that for my workshop. On board, Claire finds her seat occupied by a teenager staring at a boarding pass like it might change if he believes hard enough. The muscle memory flares, the old snap crawling up her throat, then evaporates like fog in sun. Hey, she says, soft as a secret. Want to check together? He shows her 21C, printed too light to see. She smiles. You're close, this one's 20C. I'll flag someone. The FA arrives, moves the kid to the right spot with a credit and a thank you, and the entire scene barely exists long enough to become a story. That's the point. Not every lesson needs a spotlight. Some just want a corridor and a nod. Mid-flight, turbulence visits without unpacking. People reflexively grab armrests and gods. Claire breathes slow. The captain does the announce no, don't know next checkpoint cadence, and the cabin settles like a skittish horse with a hand on its neck. Claire flips open amplified moments and adds a paragraph about how naming uncertainty out loud turns fear into a thing with edges. She writes, we can't always be brave on schedule, but we can be kinder without notice. She doesn't know if anyone will ever read this document. She knows she will. Back on the ground, life refuses to become a montage. It is emails and naps and the long, dull grind of learning not to star in every scene you're in. Claire screws up twice in one day and catches herself a third time before the sentence leaves her mouth. She texts Ari, 2 out of 3 isn't bad? Ari replies, it's literally better than yesterday. They celebrate with tacos because adulting requires rituals that aren't just feedback loops. Across town, Malik hosts an AMA with frontline staff. He sits on a stool because he hates podiums. They turn people into lectures. Questions ping-pong. A hard one about schedules that pretend childcare is optional. A nerdy one about the tech stack that keeps mislabeling seats at exactly 1 outstation. A personal one he almost skips and then chooses not to. What's a time you got it wrong recently? He thinks of 5 answers and chooses the one that costs him the right amount. I snapped at an analyst in a meeting because I thought he was stonewalling, he says. Turned out he was trying to tell me the model we all liked was brittle and the data wasn't what we thought. I apologized in DMs. That's not enough, so I apologized in the channel where the model was being decided. And I wrote myself a sticky. Don't confuse quiet with withholding. I'll get it wrong again. I'm less proud of being right than I am committed to being responsible when I'm not. The room breathes out. Vulnerability as currency can be counterfeit. This feels like legal tender. After, a newer FA approaches him, shy and fierce, and says, when you say responsibility, it sounds like weight, but when Santos says it, it sounds like space. Malik grins. That's because she's smarter than I am. On his way out, he passes a wall where someone has started an analog message board. Index cards pinned with yarn and hope. One card reads, today a passenger thanked me for moving a conflict off the jet bridge. Another says, we caught a duplicate seat at scan and no one had to perform their panic in public. Another, and signed, says, I messed up a tone and fixed it in the next sentence. He doesn't take a photo. He takes the feeling. That night, he walks home instead of catching a car. A street musician plays a tune that stumbles and then finds itself. He drops a bill in the case and thinks about how often the stumble is the point. Without it, the finding isn't felt. He texts his mother, you were right about making it easier for people to choose their better selves. She replies, of course. Also, eat. He laughs in the dark, puts his phone away, and does as he's told. The next morning, a weather system throws a tantrum across 3 hubs, and all the elegant plans of men wobble like tray tables in turbulence. Delays stack like plates in a sink. Heat spikes despite all the training in the world because sometimes the world is just tired. And yet, resolve mode catches 4 conflicts before they metastasize. A captain narrates uncertainty so well a toddler stops crying to listen. Santos anchors a cabin with 13 small sentences and 1 well-timed silence. Claire, stuck in an airport with too much time, buys coffee for a stranger who looks like she's been losing all week. None of this trends. All of it counts.